All eyes on the Lone Star State. The Senate seat is up for grabs as a veteran incumbent faces his toughest primary yet. Redrawn maps are shaking up Congress, while a wide-open race for Attorney General transforms the power structure in Austin. The polls, the players, the path to victory. This is Battleground Texas.
Welcome to Battleground Texas. I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas. Man, we are almost to Election Day. It's tomorrow, and the last 48 hours has been consumed with headlines that gives Texas voters a lot to think about as they head to the polls with the massive U.S.-Israeli airstrike on Iran and the mass shooting on 6th Street in Austin. It is creating a huge political topic, and the candidates in these races are weighing in on it. The candidates for governor and Senate all weighing in on social media this weekend. One of the most notable exchanges was between Democrat for Senate James Tallarico and Governor Greg Abbott. Tallarico started by posting, "There is something profoundly cynical about asking God to solve a problem that we're not willing to solve ourselves." That had Governor Abbott responding quickly. The problem here, James, is not the gun show loophole. It's the unvetted immigrant loophole, allowing unvetted immigrants who are hostile to America, who are loyal to our adversaries like Iran, must end. Then we got a reply from Tallarico saying, "Dangerous people should not be allowed in this country. Dangerous people should not be allowed to get guns. Texans understand this. You apparently don't." Then the governor, likely general election opponent Gina Hinojosa, state representative, focused on the victims as she posted, "We shouldn't have to wake up to the news such as unnecessary tragedy. Life is precious. On that, we can all agree. We must work harder to protect it." Let me bring in my colleagues, Rudy Koski in Austin and our friend Mark Jones from Rice University in Houston. Rudy, what's on your mind from this weekend?
Well, Stephen, that was a mouthful right there. And boy, we thought Friday was a busy day. So, all right, let's do a Monday reminder regarding some other weekend political news that may now be more of a long gone memory, like roadkill on a West Texas highway. Long gone. Friday night, there were social media double tap endorsements by President Trump. His stamp of approval going to Sid Miller in the Ag Commissioner's race and Don Huffines for Comptroller. Now, this is big because those endorsements are direct opposite endorsements given by Governor Abbott to Kelly Hancock and Nate Sheets. So a little news there that may have been missed by all the other big headlines. Stephen?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was an embarrassment of riches or stories. Mark, what made headlines for you in between you supporting your daughters in their cheerleading competition this weekend?
I mean, certainly the turnout that we saw on Friday really was, record turnout for an already record turnout cycle. Democrats coming out of the woodwork. We see 1.5 million Democrats voted early. In 2022 and 2024, the average was 1 million voting in the entire cycle. So that was one thing. And then, sort of dovetailing on what Rudy said, Huffines getting that endorsement from Donald Trump in the controller's race is a big endorsement in the sense that it could potentially push him over the 50% threshold and have him not have to go to a runoff. And then on the Ag Commissioner side, I think Nate Sheets was already pretty much dead in the water, and that just is just one more reason why Sid Miller's going to win on Tuesday.
Rudy, you talked about all of these endorsements, right? And, it's a test of some of these endorsements pits Trump versus Abbott, like Mark was talking about with Huffines and, Hancock. And then with this ag race, Sid Miller and Nate Sheets, who do you think will come out on top looking nice on Tuesday night?
I don't predict jury verdicts, and I don't predict elections. I've been burned so many times. But if our good friend Greg Grugan was here, he would probably say it's political cannibalism at its best. There's blood in the water, everyone. Just blood in the water. So Greg's not there. There's my homage to our good friend to Greg. There's a lot of blood, a lot of political blood in the water. It's going to be interesting to see how Tuesday shakes out.
Yeah, no, you are correct, and none of us have a crystal ball. Okay, on the Democrat side for U.S. Senate, the candidates are crisscrossing the state. Jasmine Crockett was in our home district, happened to be at my church on Sunday. And our colleague, Rudy Koski, just finished talking to James Tallarico, who's in Houston. Take a listen.
Well, we're all on the same team trying to change the politics of this state and of this country. I do think I bring something unique to this primary. I'm the only candidate that has been in a competitive general election. I'm the only candidate who has flipped a seat like this. I first got elected to the state house by flipping a Trump district in a county that was so red it hadn't voted for a Democrat for president since Jimmy Carter. And I did that by inspiring Democrats, bringing in new voters, particularly young voters, and peeling people off from the other side. We have to do all three if we're going to win this race in November. I have a proven track record of doing that at the ballot box. And that's the kind of movement we're building. It's not left versus right. It's top versus bottom. We are bringing working people together across all these divisions, the partisan divisions, the racial and cultural and religious divisions, so that we can take power away from the people at the very top and bring it back into our communities.
They want us to sit around and be depressed and be upset because we have somebody that decided that he's going to drop bombs at will and he's going to put our loved ones in harm's way. But I am here to tell you that weeping may endure for a night, but y'all are going to issue that joy in the morning. That joy comes in the form of you showing up and making sure that you push back in this moment. They have been counting us out for far too long, but you are showing up in a historic way. They don't believe in us.
All right, another day, another poll. We'll talk about it on the other side of this break. Welcome back. There's some new polling. I keep talking about every day. It's a new poll. Well, there is a new Emerson poll out that dropped this weekend, just days before the primary election day, and it has Attorney General Ken Paxton at 40%, Senator John Cornyn at 36%, and Congressman Wesley Hunt with 17%. Now, with Hunt siphoning off a segment of the electorate, we are essentially guaranteed that this multi-million-dollar race is likely headed to a May 26 runoff. Turning to the Democrats, the new poll shows that State Representative James Tallarico has a narrow lead over Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Tallarico sits at 52% to Crockett's 47%. If those numbers hold at the ballot box tomorrow, Tallarico will clear the critical 50% threshold to avoid a runoff. Now, the margin of error for this survey is 4.1%. Rudy Koski, we were talking a lot off air. Candidates are making this final push. What stands out to you about this Democratic turnout? We talked about more than 1.2 million Democrats turning out. That's more than the total vote count in 2022, 2024. What does this signal, at least for tomorrow?
Well, it signals that the Democrats are solidified and that they are upset, and the base is coming out in force. Now, we were talking earlier in the newsroom about this. You know, this all kind of started with the anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protest and how that energized that part of the base. And then you got the ICE and the Federal Enforcement of Immigration, that group all energized and going really big. And then you get Jasmine Crockett jumping into this race, and all of a sudden James Tallarico building this big push, and that has just, so you got the trifecta of great ingredients to get your base really energized. And I think that's what we're seeing right now, is a really strongly energized Democrat base that really hasn't found a lot of big pushback yet for the Republicans, because they've been busy fighting among themselves, as we were joking earlier, the political cannibalism that's been going on the GOP side. So the slugfest there with Tallarico and Crockett, that's amazing. But in my conversation that I had with James earlier today, he said, you know, these polls, it seems like they're all changing on a daily basis now. And I asked him, I said, well, you know, what's your take? And he goes, only one poll matters, and that's the one that's counted on Tuesday. And, you know, that echoes pretty much what Jasmine Crockett told you, Stephen. She pretty much said the same thing. She's not focused on the polls. Right. She's focused on that last vote, right?
That's absolutely right. Mark, I'm going to turn things to you. You're a numbers guy, and you operate in polls as well. But, okay, we know that Republicans tend to vote more than Democrats on Election Day. But sticking with the Democratic side for now, with over 1.2 million Democrats voting statewide early, what numbers are you expecting or thinking we may be seeing at the polls on Tuesday?
Well, so yeah, we've had about 1.5 million now, the most recent numbers in terms of people who've turned out early. Typically, about 60% of the Democratic vote is cast early, 40% on Election Day. I suspect Democrats are front-loading a little more than normal, so I think it's more likely that about 35% of the vote will be on Election Day. But in a very close election between Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico, that Election Day turnout could really spell the difference between victory and defeat. On the Republican side, turnout's been much more normal in the sense that Republicans generally would average a little over 2 million voters in this type of election, and they're on track for about, say, 2.3, compared to Democrats that are going to be more between 2.5 and 2.75. And so on the Republican side, generally more people will turn out on Election Day, so it won't be half of voters, but it's likely going to be around 45%. But with that particularly distributed in the more rural areas of the state, where turnout on Election Day tends to be much higher than in the urban areas, in part because early voting sites aren't as convenient in rural areas as they are here in places like Harris County, up in Dallas County, or in Travis County.
Rudy, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Senator Ted Cruz is not having a watch party. Is that him just being focused on, I know I'm going to make it to May, or does that signal something to you?
Well, you know, I think that his candidates are his candidates, and he's able to just kind of, you know, did you say Cruz or Cornyn? Let me back that up real quick.
Cornyn's not having the party.
Cornyn. Yeah.
Cornyn, right, Cornyn. All right, yeah, I was like going, I thought Cruz isn't even running. You know, with Cornyn, you know, I really don't know how to read that right now in regards to he's really pushing hard. You know, is this one of those things where he just is hoping for that runoff, and we'll see what happens with that. And looking at the poll, it's still pretty much a toss-up, right, guys? The only odd man out remains Hunt. He seems to have peaked, and barring a cataclysmic event on Tuesday, you know, this was just a good first run for him to maybe set up something down the line, along that line. One down ballot race, though, guys, that I'm watching is that Democrat primary in regards to the comptroller's race. If it's Sarah Eckhart, watch out. Watch out. She's got the chutzpah and the right cross to make that a very, very interesting race, regardless of who makes it out of the GOP primary race for comptroller. So that one is one that I'm really watching to see how that one's going to develop. What do you think there, Mark?
I mean, certainly controller, especially if you have a more extreme candidate like Dunn Huffines win on the Republican side. We could see that become more of a race. Now, one of the liabilities of Eckhart is she is one of the 2 most liberal members of the Texas Senate, and if the race becomes competitive, you can bet Republicans will focus in on that.
All right, guys, we got so much more to discuss and so many other races. We'll talk about that when we come back. Early voting, of course, is wrapped up in Texas, and now the numbers are showing that what we've been talking about today, there's a massive surge when it comes to the Democrats ahead of tomorrow's primary election day. According to the Secretary of State's office, about 2.5 million Texans have already cast their ballot in this primary for in-person or by mail. Now, Democrats outpace Republicans by nearly 200,000 votes. Political analysts say that a record-breaking spending and tight Senate races on both sides are driving this historic turnout, bringing back my colleague Rudy Koski and Mark Jones. Rudy, I mean, this is the most expensive Senate race in history, more than $120 million being spent, and not even to talk about how much more millions are going to be spent in May when they have their runoff.
Yeah, right now it's a season that's lots of fun for the political base and political pundits like us and analysts. We love to look at these numbers. A lot of tea leaf predicting in those primary early numbers, though, right? There's no doubt that Democrats came out strong. No doubt whatsoever. Surveys indicating a swing to the left by a lot of independents. That is one of the headlines coming out of this early voting. But after Tuesday, let's face it, guys, those votes will no longer matter. And the push to the real count begins. You know, it's clear the GOP can't go into some type of summertime lull and just sit back with their mint juleps and say, oh, it's all going to be okay in November. You know, it's a good bet that the Democrats aren't going to hit the brakes. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Republicans start putting shoe leather to the sidewalks. Mark, you know, we were talking earlier about breaking these numbers down.
Right. So one thing we've seen is among the approximately 1.5 million Democrats who've turned out to vote, the Secretary of State office numbers always lag because several counties, Nueces, Collin, often are late. But among those voters, about a third of them have never voted in a Democratic primary before. Now, generally in November, they vote Democratic, but this time around, between the attraction of the Tallarico-Crockett race and their desire to show their opposition to President Trump, that's driving a group to the polls who simply normally doesn't participate. And that's one of the reasons why the polls are jumping around so much, because people aren't entirely sure who, if you're polling or they're polling the correct people. On the Republican side, what we're seeing is it's more similar to the usual suspects in terms of people who generally vote in primaries. It's an electorate that's very old. Only about maybe 5% is under the age of 35, compared to the Democratic side, where we're actually seeing a boost in turnout by Gen Z. It's still not massive, more in like the 10 to 12% range, but certainly larger than it is in the past. And we've also seen record turnout among black voters, particularly from the Metroplex, but also here in Houston. And one of the reasons why the candidates were here in Houston today is they're focused on getting those black voters as well as other voters in Harris County who haven't turned out to vote to actually participate on Election Day, with Crockett banking heavily that the African American community will come out in force to support her.
That's a big thing, and that's really, I mean, clearly what Jasmine Crockett, at least for this primary, is focusing on, is tapping into black voters who already show up and who don't show up. Okay, we got one more block coming up. See you guys after this break. All right, well, we are back. In this block, we typically talk about something else that we're wondering about. I can't wait. I know we're talking about Senate and all these other races, but I really want to see how some of these congressional races go. Julie Johnson versus Colin Allred. How is that going to go? Who's going to be the new face of Texas 32, the district that goes from the Dallas suburbs to all the way past Tyler, almost to Louisiana? I can't wait to see who wins in those races, and will those races go to a runoff? Rudy, what's on your mind?
Well, the big question for me coming out of the primary is, will the Astros make the playoffs come this fall? Other than that, let's get back to elections. You know, can the Democrats keep the energy going, and how will the Republicans respond? You know, that seems to be my theme today. So far, it looks like spring break is going to get political. Don't go to the beach, kids. Hit the pavement in the neighborhoods. Democrats announcing a 7-day, 10-city post-primary road trip, and they want to round up local volunteers. The young Republicans here in Texas coming to Round Rock, Texas. They're not coming here for the donuts, guys. They're coming here to strategize. Stephen?
Yeah, Mark, real quick, what you got?
Well, I think like you, I'm looking at these congressional races. Down here in Houston, we have Congressional District 2, where Congressman Dan Crenshaw is being challenged by State Representative Steve Toth, and longtime in Congressional District 18, when longtime Congressman Al Green is being challenged by recently arrived Congressman Christian Menefee in a battle between sort of new, vigorous Christian Menefee and the old guard of Al Green, but with his seniority in the U.S. Congress.
All right, that's all the time we have to see this episode or any of our past ones. Go to our station's YouTube channels and keep the conversation going by interacting with us on.
All right, tomorrow's the last day to vote in the primary. We will be back Tuesday at 3 with an hour-long look at what's happening at the polls and on the battleground. See you tomorrow.